Hey adventurers, so today is going to be my spoiler discussion for episode 6 of the Rings of Power. This episode is titled Udun. I did get that title, and I actually made sure that I got it this one. Of course, this is a spoiler discussion, so I will be talking spoilers in this, and to start out, I'll say this till the end. I'll come back to that title in a bit. So starting, as always, I'll just read through my notes that I wrote down as I was watching the episode. So, I think we pretty much start with Adar and the orcs, and Adar plants some seeds and says, I forget the phrase that he says in Elvish, but it's basically life over death. And I can't think of the exact phrase. Should be able to remember it, but I can't. Anyway, but then he goes and talks to his orcs or uruks and gives a speech, and I like a lot of his speech. And then some of it doesn't work as well, and I was just watching through it, and some of it felt really powerful as like a Dark Lord speech type thing, and some of it didn't feel like that at all. It felt just kind of, well, okay then, and that's kind of an issue, because so far all the speeches have not been powerful in this show. I haven't been impressed with any of the speeches in this show. I don't feel moved by any of them or want to get up and go fight. I mean, like, the speeches in the Lord of the Rings movies are so powerful, so moving. The one that Theoden gives, the ones that Aragorn gives, even Gandalf when he's just sitting there talking to Pippin. Those are powerful speeches, and so they need some work on their speech writing skills in this show. Okay, so then they're fighting. They're in Ostirith. Ostirith is the name of the tower that I still don't have any idea where it's located. But Ostirith is the tower that the elven guards lived at, or whatever it was, and then that's where the orcs are coming to attack, and all the stuff going on with that storyline. But one of the first things that we see right at the start of that little short battle thingy is, what's his name? Arondir shoots an orc, and it falls against this railing, and the railing just snaps. Normally that'd be fine, except that the orc didn't fall nearly hard enough against the railing to snap it, and that railing should not be as unkept up as it is for being an elven watchtower. Like, very disappointed in that, but I just noticed it as the railing broke way too easily. The orc didn't fall nearly hard enough against it to break it like that. Little minor thing. Then we switch over to Galadriel sailing with the Númenóreans, and she looks out, or Isildur is actually following his perspective, and he does some stuff and comes up on top of the ship and looks out, and Galadriel walks up behind him, and they have a conversation, and one of the things that she says, she asks him, talks to him about being the first one to sight land or something like that, and she says, "It'll be visible to your eyes in a few moments." And I really like that. I actually like this whole scene where they're talking about it, because for some reason I like the idea that Galadriel as an elf knows when what would be human sight would kick in, and you'd be able to start seeing things. And that's really, for some reason, that's really interesting to me and really cool to me. That little tiny detail that the elves, not only can they see super far and super long ways and have their elven eyesight, but they also understand about where that eyesight would cut off for a human. And just a very interesting little lore thing that I don't think is necessarily in the books, but I kind of like. But plus that whole scene where they're talking and they're discussing, pretty much that entire scene I liked. First time I've cared at all about Bronwyn and Theo. I still don't like them though. So they have the speech in the village now, where Arondir and Bronwyn are giving a speech together, and it's really weird, unnecessary. I don't know why they switched it back and forth between the two of them, but also it's Bronwyn who's the one who's giving tactical order. Like, there's a lot of it that doesn't really make sense, plus the speech isn't terribly great, but there are some scenes in there that actually, in that section, in that scene, some moments in that scene, I guess, where I actually start to care about Bronwyn and Theo, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I actually feel like these are real characters now, and I still don't like them, I still don't care if they die, but at least I feel like they're real people now. So that was good. But okay, so then it also zooms out and looks at the village from like a drone shot type thing. it's a static shot, so I don't think it's a drone shot, but it's, you see the entire village, and there's like 4 or 5 buildings in the village. And I mean, like, I understand small villages and everything, but there's a whole lot of people that live in that village, and I don't understand, I don't see why there would only be 5 buildings in the village. I can understand people having houses outside of the village and coming into the village to trade or whatever. But still, I feel like there'd be more buildings. I mean, even do like 10 buildings in the village, that would be more realistic in my opinion. And so it seemed like a rather small village, and made me question, why is there only 5 buildings? Oh yeah. So then they have this plan of what to do for the orcs and everything like that. And so Bronwyn is in one place with another lady, and she's trying to light a torch with flint, and so she's striking the flint over the close-up shot. She's striking the flint over the torch, and the torch is blowing, and she can't get it to light, even though she's creating sparks and everything. And then it takes a shot from a different angle, and she's still striking the flint, but the lady's holding the torch above the flint. What are you doing? She's not even holding the flint above the torch, is what I have written down with a facepalm emoji, because it's just like, guys, that's such a blatant mistake. It's a continuity error is what it is too, because the next scene it switches back and she's above the torch again. But you notice these things and you're like, why did you do it this way? What was your reasoning for not just making sure that when you do this other shot she's still striking flint above the torch? Like, it doesn't make sense. It's stupid. Get into the main battle, and Arondir's standing up behind some rocks shooting things, and what I have written down, shooting arrows at the orcs. And what I have written down is Arondir should be able to shoot much faster. There's different options that he could do that with. Legolas was shooting much faster. But anyways, so I had hold a bunch of arrows in your hand, shoot multiple at a time, whatever it takes. He's an elf. So basically what I'm getting at with this is, so there's different ways to shoot a bow. Some where you hold more arrows in your draw hand, or some in your bow hand, and what you do is you learn how to shoot like that so that it's just a quick reload really fast. Either grab them from this hand in front of you, or you have them in your string hand, and there's other ways to shoot that's faster. You could also have 2 arrows on the string at once, 3 arrows on the string. They're elves. It's kind of stupid and kind of unnatural, unrealistic in many ways, but at the same time they're elves. This is the type of stuff that they do, and we kind of buy it because they're elves. And so he seemed to be taking too long to shoot his bow. That's fine, whatever. But then the orc comes up, kills his other archer partner that's right beside him, and he gets into a fist fight with it. He has a sword, he doesn't pull the sword, he gets into a fist fight. So I write down, why wasn't the first thing you did pull your sword? And there should be a B in there, but it should be, why wasn't the first thing you did be to pull your sword or something? And he doesn't. He just like tries to fight the orc, and then another 2 of them get up there or something like that, and he's having a fist fight with 3 orcs, and they fall off the roof. And then, so like he takes down those orcs on the ground or something like that, and he stands up and he doesn't look around. He's just he doesn't know anything that he's doing. He's an elf, he's fought before. He knows all these things. But he doesn't look around, and then, so I say, why did you not look around? Because he then bumps into a giant orc. And then, why did you walk right into his fist? So they're in a fist fight now, and Arondir can see it. I mean, the orc telegraphs his punch so bad, and like you see the punch coming, and Arondir just looks at it and gets punched in the face. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then more of the fight, it's just unnecessarily gory. Like he pokes the orc in the eye, and you don't see anything until he pulls the spike out, and then it's just blood spurt over and over again for like a minute and a half as they're struggling until Bronwyn comes up and stabs the orc in the neck. But it's just like unnecessarily gory, and you're like, I mean, gory doesn't tend to affect me that much, especially like fantasy gore. But I'm just wondering, like, why did you need to go that gory and keep showing the blood spurting out of his eye socket? And just like, what are you doing? So it's kind of stupid. But then they're all locked. Things happen. The plot continues. They're all locked into whatever the tavern or whatever the building is. and the orcs break through, and the first thing that Arondir does is he tries to punch them or something like that. And I'm like, why don't you draw your sword? You have a sword for a reason. It's so you can poke the orcs and kill them. That's what it's there for. Why doesn't Arondir draw a sword ever? Like it's never his first instinct to draw a sword, which your sword is your force multiplier. Your sword is the thing that's sharp, that's going to do the most damage. Why don't you draw it? It's frustrating. So at the beginning of the episode, they gave us a length of time that it would take the Númenóreans to get their ships up the river, and then a length of time to get their horses ridden into Mordor, basically. And the length of time that they gave was like a day and a half or 2 days total or something like that. But it's not been that long, and yet they make it there. So what did I have? They give us the length of time, basically 1.5 days, that it would take to get to the village. It hasn't been that long yet when the Númenóreans arrive. But then it's also I also wrote down, and horses riding that hard for that long would not have enough energy to fight, let alone their riders. I mean, yes, I understand the Númenóreans are stronger, physically bigger, stronger than normal humans, but still, the horses would be so dead tired that they wouldn't be worth anything in battle, because they've literally ridden hard for a full day at this point, supposedly, if you follow their timeline. I don't understand. I mean, like, there's simple things that needed to be fixed that weren't, and I don't understand why they can't fix these little tiny issues that are so blatantly obvious. Oh yeah, so I have in my notes written down the chain thing, facepalm emoji again. So I mentioned this in the trailer when they showed this in one of the trailers, that a couple of the cavalry dudes have a chain that they have stretched out and they ride through a bunch of orcs, and I'm like, I mentioned it when reacting to the trailer. I'm like, that's very unrealistic, because you'd probably get pulled off your horses by that. It's just like, this scene is so stupid, so unrealistic. Why did they do it? And it like knocks down and kills a bunch of orcs or something like that, and I'm like, no, it wouldn't. There's 3 orcs. You might get through the first 3 orcs in front, but then you'd get stuck at the next line of them and get yanked off your horses and then get killed. I don't. And why did the orcs line up in a big group like that to get hit by the chain? Then Galadriel rides in and she flips upside down and like does this massive slash that kills, like completely disembowels a orc, just like explodes him. And I'm like, yeah, maybe, but that's a lot of that's a lot of power while upside down, Galadriel. It's spectacle. It's not substance or realistic. I did like this though. So then they chase after. First off, Galadriel comes up and talks to Arondir, and they have a very, very brief conversation. And Arondir's like, or Theo asks Arondir, "Who's that?" And he's like, "That's the commander of the Northern Armies. That's Galadriel." Like, he's awestruck by it, and so is Theo. But it's like a very cool scene, because he's like, this is legitimately a major celebrity, and this is awesome that she's here, but at the same time, like, now I've got to really up my game type. It's just a very cool interaction for me to see, because it's how it would be when you see that type of thing. But then, so Galadriel goes chasing after, what's his name? Adar. On a horse. He stole a horse, and Galadriel's on her horse, and they go chasing after each other, and then Halbrand joins the chase and somehow gets around and comes from the other way. Not sure how that happens, but anyways, they catch Adar. That's the point of the scene. And Galadriel is still turning herself back around and getting back over here. And Halbrand's standing over Adar with the spear, and he's like, "Do you remember me?" And Adar's like, "No." But it just like, because that's not something that, I mean, it is something that you see, but it's just like the performance and the delivery of those lines worked so well in this scene, because Halbrand's whole thing is like, I left these places, I sort of never returned to the Southlands, all this kind of stuff. I was driven out, all these things, I wasn't a king, but I was supposed to be king, all this type of stuff. And so when he gets there and sees Adar, and he's clearly recognized that. I mean, it's the same thing as the Avengers Endgame where Wanda's like, you took everything from me, and Thanos is like, I don't even know who you are. It's basically that same scene in this, but I like the delivery of their lines better in this for some reason. It worked really well for me. I need to keep going. So, in that same scene where Galadriel and Halbrand have Adar on the ground there and they're dealing with him and everything, Adar is talking and Galadriel's like, eat your tongue. That's such a stupid sounding curse, or like a stupid sounding way to say shut up. I don't know. I didn't buy it. It didn't feel realistic. Should have said something in Elvish, an Elvish version of shut up. Like, that would have been interesting. So then we switch into the barn where Galadriel's interrogating Adar, and the camera is tilted at an angle the entire time, and then it switches to a different angle, different shot of looking at Galadriel and everything, and it's still tilted. I'm like, what is your reason for tilting the camera in this shot? It's unnecessary. I mean, like, they did it to make it feel, give the shot a different feel and make it feel kind of unhinged a little bit and everything. Like, I understand the filmmaker's perspective on doing that shot, but it was unnecessary and it didn't really work. So why do it? So anyways, Sauron's desire to bring order and heal is accurate. So Adar has this conversation with Galadriel where she's like, after the fall of Morgoth, Sauron looked at Middle-earth and wanted to help it heal, wanted to help restore order and fix the issues that were in Middle-earth, which is very accurate to who Sauron was for about, I think it was about 400 years in the Second Age, beginning of the Second Age. Sauron was not the evil bad guy that he was. He basically turned back to the good. And it was very interesting moment in because he's a Maya. Sauron is a Maya, and he's worked very, very closely during the creation of the world. He worked very closely with Manwë, I believe, and then he was corrupted by Morgoth. But after Morgoth fell, he turned kind of back to the light and turned back to the order, and so his whole thing is order and everything like that. And I'm glad that they incorporated that's what Sauron was doing, and I appreciate that because that's an actual accuracy from the lore. But then Adar is still talking, and I have written down, very interesting that Adar thinks he is a child of Eru, and that the orcs are children of Eru, or children of the One is what he calls them, and he says, we're all children of the One, or something like that, which is very interesting to think about, because that implies that Adar doesn't think he's corrupted and that his children are still true children of Iluvatar, which they aren't. But it's very interesting that he thinks that. They're a corruption. Galadriel goes through this and talks through this, and she's like, no, you're a corruption. You're not true. If you were truly children of Eru, you would think, this type of conversation where they wouldn't be about chaos and murder and all that kind of stuff. But that whole concept of Adar being actually being a corrupted elf, being one of the original orcs, which is what I suspected he was from the very beginning. But seeing all that, I appreciated seeing that because it seemed realistic. And then him still thinking, no, I'm not corrupted, I'm an Uruk, I'm no longer an elf, I'm an Uruk, but I'm still a child of Iluvatar, and I don't know, it's just very interesting, that concept to me. And I have written down, Galadriel was almost doing good, and then she turned vengeful again. And like during most of this conversation, she was doing good, she was very level-headed, seemed almost like Galadriel, like several times in this episode she seemed almost like Galadriel actually. But then she loses it and nearly kills Adar, and Halbrand walks in just in time to keep her from killing him and everything. But it's just like, she was almost there, she was almost Galadriel, and then she went vengeful again. But then we have another scene where Halbrand and Galadriel are sitting there, and they're talking about the connection that they felt while fighting, and how they basically setting up that they have a connection and that they need to love each other type thing. And then so it's like trying to do a romance between them. I'm like, don't do it. Do not do it. And they didn't, at least not in this episode, but they tried to. They tried very, very hard to. Then we go back to the village, and Bronwyn is talking to Muriel. And she says somebody says something about leading the people, and Bronwyn says, a burden I never sought to take up. And I'm like, yeah, right. That's all you did. Because since basically episode, what was it, 2? I think episode 2 was when she was like, no, we got to go. As soon as, like, immediately she tried to take up it. Just another thing that rang false to a burden I never sought to take up, except that that's all she ever did was try to lead the people, gave speeches that weren't powerful. Like, it's just thing after thing, and we're just like, no, this isn't true, Bronwyn. You did try and take it up. After the episode, thoughts. So I have really just this one thought is, how did nothing important for the flood mechanism and how it get destroyed when the tower fell? So I didn't think about this until afterwards. But basically, and this will get back into Udun, my title discussion, which I saved till the end here. But basically how did nothing get destroyed? Okay, so at the beginning, they destroy the whole tower of Osterith and everything and knock it down in kind of unbelievable way, but whatever. And so the whole tower gets destroyed, all the stuff inside the tower gets destroyed, but then Waldreg with the sword goes and activates the sword and activates the key and turns it, and it releases all the water. It's basically a dam. And so he releases the river and it all comes flowing out, and my first thought is, how did none of the mechanisms for anything in the dam or the dam itself or anything like that not get destroyed when the tower fell and destroyed everything? How did even the keyhole and everything not get, just like logistics of that whole sequence is just like, no, this doesn't make any sense. But then that gets back into, after you forget about that sequence, you see all the water flowing through this channel, which the tunnel that they dug was a channel. It allowed the water to flow all the way to Mount Doom and into Mount Doom, which then activated the dormant volcano. And I appreciate that. The water, the cold water flowing into this lava causes a reaction, which causes the volcano to explode. So I do like that. That was a good way to make this dormant volcano become non-dormant anymore. But anyway, so that leads us back into the title discussion, which the title of the episode is Udun, which I recognize this word, and as soon as I heard it, or as soon as I saw what the title was, that it was Udun, I thought back to, what I know that word from is Gandalf and the Balrogs face-off in Moria on the Bridge of Khazad-dûm and everything like that, and he calls the Balrog Flame of Udun. So I had to do some quick research to remember what Udun was, and I was thinking, I couldn't remember exactly what it was, but what I found out is, with my quick Googling, basically, which I know it's accurate because I remember it now, but the Morgoth's old fortress was Utumno or Udun, one of those two names. So that's what it is Udun. Flame of Udun is a Balrog from the pits of Morgoth's stronghold, fortress, whatever. But so that's where I know that one from. But there's also another Udun, and that is a valley in Mordor. And basically what they did with this one, and this is probably not, it's not in the books, but the tunnel that they've been digging, that the orcs have been digging and that they've been forcing the elves to dig and everything like that, is the valley Udun. And I kind of really like that. I kind of appreciate that. The importance of this valley in the middle of Mordor is so that they could activate the volcano. But there's an actual reason for there being pretty much a straight valley in Mordor, and it's because it was dug. It was purposely put there. It had a specific purpose, all that kind of stuff. And so I really appreciate a lot of that. But anyway, so yeah, that's really all my thoughts on this episode. Overall, a fairly decent episode. I didn't take as much enjoyment out of my time watching it as I did with the last one, but it's a much better episode in terms of staying true to the lore. So lots of things that I appreciated that with what they were doing in this episode. A lot of things that weren't so blatantly disrespectful. So lots of more or less decent things in this episode. Still not a phenomenal show, but it's not horrible. So this is definitely one of the better episodes that I've seen. That is all that's my thoughts on episode 6 of Rings of Power. I will leave it there. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite Adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday. Our social media is linked in the description down below. We will see you guys again soon. Stay warm.